Very good morning to everybody. It's a really great pleasure to be back in Istanbul. Before taking you to a number of slides, let me start with a short history. Because this is not my first time in Istanbul. And when I came 2 days ago, it was an historical day in the weather forecast in Istanbul. It was the hottest day ever measured. I come from the Netherlands. I was born and raised below sea level. Hot summers are not good news. Not for my country. 60% of my country lives below sea level. So melting icebergs, hot summers, how beautiful they can be, are bad news. Climate change is not good news for the human beings. And of course, environmental concerns in my country, therefore, is already very high from the early days. My country also is in the delta of two main rivers from Europe. And if people in Switzerland throw something in the river, we gladly receive it at the end. So already in the 60s, I would say the environmental concern is in the NDA of the people of the Netherlands. And this is probably also why, in some cases, plastics and recycling of plastics in our country has developed relatively on a high level. There's another reason to think back about Istanbul, and I look at you, Yavuz, as a good friend for many, many, many years. I'm also the founder of an NGO called Waste Free Oceans, which in 2011 we founded, together with my good friend Alexander, to fight marine debris and to clean up floating debris from the rivers. And just outside this building, on the Bosporus, we did cleanup operations together with PAGEV already 10 years ago. I've traveled the world. I've seen very dirty places. And it's not always easy then to stay proud of the plastic industry. On the other hand, 35 years ago, I started with the recycling of plastics already. And we know, and this is the good news, that a lot of technologies are already available today. We simply have to implement them and work better on the way of collection and waste streams. Waste Free Ocean, and probably some of you will ask what this is. I hope you already know. You also saw Benoit having this badge. These are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Why would you, as an industry, embrace something which is not always easy for your industry? Because you have to change. And you see, we bring this button very close to our heart, because it's the only way we as a society can survive. It also means a lot of headaches from an industry perspective, but what do I do as an industry? Where do I put my money? Where do I invest? And where are the challenges? When we started to think about microplastic, 2010, 2011, so it's not so long time ago, people thought it was just breaking down plastic products by UV light from the sea or from the beaches. Meanwhile, we know a lot of more about the sources. The last 10 years, it has gone very quickly. So one of the number one microplastic sources is called car tires. Another is paint, textile industry, the washing machines, cigarette butts. I don't know in this country, but in my country, smoking inside restaurant is already forbidden for a few years. People smoke outside, and then of course the street is public domain. So if we look at the statistics, cigarette butts are all over the place. Bad news. What we also worked on is when you go and look at the pollution of the rivers and of the seas, we need experts to collect waste. So together with the European Parliament and the European Commission, we asked some people in the fishing community to help us to bring debris back on land. It's an official European program called Fishing for Litter. What we also did, already in 2011, we started cleanup operations in the Danube River. The Danube River, you may know, ends up in the Black Sea, next to Turkey. And also together with the Black Sea Commission and the United Nations on the Mediterranean, we have worked very hard on prevention measures. And it's a slow process, but it's ongoing, and a lot of it is still on the radar. But still, this is not enough. There's another very big source, of marine litter. This is called landfill. We see many landfills being placed very close to rivers, and they're leaking into the rivers. So it's not only the industry who has a task, it's also the member states and the countries. It's also the municipalities. So even if you clean up your house and you bring the waste correctly to a waste facility, it may end up on a landfill and it may leak into the water. So it's a joint challenge. Waste Free Ocean therefore also has from the beginning a member of European Parliament as our president. So also there we see a very close cooperation with the politicians and industry. So now let's go back to, I warn you, technology and me are not good friends. Let's go to Operation Clean Sweep. Why is this so important? And I think it was already mentioned by the President and by Yavuz in particular, there is leakage of granules from our industry. So before we can point a finger to somebody else, we also need to clean our own houses. And this is why this project already was launched about 10 years ago. We are, if you want, in stage 2. The first stage was all the chemical plants, production plants, have gone through certification. Does it mean it's already perfect? No, but it's closer to perfect. Will it ever be perfect? Let's work on that. Now we are on a gigantic task, and I think, Benoit, you already mentioned it. Under the umbrella of EuPC, in the European community, we have 50,000 companies processing plastic granules to products. But we have even more logistic companies. We have even more trucks who transport the waste. We have more trucks who transport the granules from the ports into the factories. And everywhere, and I always had a discussion with NGOs on a lot of those topics. Who of you know how many granules are in a 25 kilo bag? Roughly 1 million. So if we lose only 25 kilo of plastic, 1 million granules will be in the environment. And it's easy to lose 25 kilo. Yeah. So OCS, in that sense, is a very important one. You already mentioned that there are other ways of dealing with it. Image is a big issue. I brought this bottle for a purpose. This bottle is made from 100% recycled content, post-consumer, PET, 10 years ago. It's a refillable bottle. EFSA approved. I made it in the Netherlands. The good news is, technology is there. You can do it tomorrow. The bad news is you need good systems to collect all the waste. I'm glad to hear that also in Turkey you're thinking to introduce deposit return systems, because 95 bottles out of 100 will come back. And it will allow the use on the same level, and even beyond. Because as my arms are shrinking, this bottle of this glass, this eyewear, comes from bottles out of the Danube. So we turned marine litter into eyewear. We turned marine litter into many products. It's also showing, and I think Benoit, you mentioned it, the innovative and creative power of the plastic industry. We can do this, but we have to do it together. Now let's take you a little bit to, I would say, a job we all need to finish. It's a joint project together with EuPC and Plastic Europe. Plastic Europe is the organization of the plastic producing companies, around 100 companies producing granules all around the world. Okay, let me give you a quick overview. This is how virgin plastic looks like. Yesterday we had a good meeting also with the recycling section in PAGEV. The same goes for recycling. Pellets from recyclates are often transported in big bags. If there is a loophole in a big bag they leak. So don't only think it's virgin material which is leaking, it's leaking also in other sources. Some of you may have seen this picture before. It's part of a study from Inomia, which is a consultancy company working a lot for the European Commission. Have a good look at this picture first. You see all the sources and all the potentials and all the things which you do. And don't believe that the tourists on the beach are the biggest source. The biggest source is industry, the biggest source is landfill. But nevertheless, once it's in the water, it's very difficult to get it out. And close to the shore, maybe we have a chance. In the middle of the oceans, it's getting dramatically wrong. And as you can see, and there are studies in the 5 gyres, you have heard about those nice gyres in the oceans. There are 5 gyres. Roughly 30% of them are in the first 2 or 3 meters, so we can capture them if really we want. But what is on the seafloor is lost forever. What we also didn't know, and as I told you, I started about 35 years ago in the plastic industry. Until roughly 10 years ago, I was not so much aware that, for example, microplastic have been used in cosmetics. It were NGOs like Greenpeace and a few others who showed me that we are putting plastic in toothpaste, that we are putting microplastic in shampoos, which of course there are better alternatives for that. Yeah, and fortunately, and also with some pressure from the politicians, of course, industry, the cosmetic industry is changing. They are phasing out. And of course, some have asked for time because they need alternative sources. They need new testing. They need to go through a lot of certification. But I can tell you, I would say the majority of the cosmetic industry has started to phase out microplastic uses. You already mentioned, Javus, that there is legislation oncoming. Yes, unintentionally used microplastic will be regulated by law in the European Union. But that leaves still a lot of work to be done. What is Ocean Clean Sweep about? It is the whole value chain working with plastic products and plastic granules. Whenever there's a loss, clean it. Prevent it from going to the sewage. Prevent it from heavy rainfall, swapping your streets, and putting it in places where it's difficult to recover. And it's a journey, and it's a responsibility we have to take on ourselves. We cannot put the finger to somebody else if we cannot clean up our own houses. These are some of the pictures how it can look like. And I can just tell you by own experience, these are not even the worst pictures. It's difficult to be proud of an industry if you see this. And then I think, Benoit, you mentioned about image. Of course, if people, the consumer sees this image, they think plastic is bad. No. Our waste management system is not functioning very well. We need to improve on waste management. We need, as an industry, to give home to this material in the next generation of products. We need to go circular. Will there never be leakage? Yes, of course, there will always be some leakage. But we have to be clever on how to catch it. We have to make sure that, for example, sewage systems don't end up in the lakes anymore, that they go to purification systems. If we install recycling facilities, there need to be water treatment systems. Yeah. It means investment, it means challenges, it means headaches, but it needs to be done. Because this, on the pictures, is not sustainable. And you find this on every single corner of the planet, including my own home country, which we believe we are very good. If I go to the middle, to the city center of Amsterdam, I go to the city center of Rotterdam, I can find traces of this. And if it's not a granule, it's a bag, it's a bottle, it's something. We did projects in Africa. Between the mangroves, it's almost impossible to recover it. Yeah? So again, whatever we can stop getting into the water, we don't have to get out. So, together with Plastic Europe, EuPC decided to give this an additional push. And we reached out to our value chain partners to get certified in a system which is transparent, which can be audited for the management of pallet loss in Europe. But that's not enough. As I said, we transport a lot from the ports. A lot of polymers is not produced in Europe, it comes from overseas. It's transshipped in ports. There is leakage in ports. There is leakage on trucks. There's leakage by human mistakes. And there's leakage because people don't care, or they don't understand the consequences. And we all have to get and talk in our value chain to give examples to prevent it. And whenever there's a leakage, to deal with it as efficient as possible. The goal, of course, is to offer a united solution, which any company can work with in Europe. And the OCS program is looking at a site level. So if you have 10 different factories or 10 different warehouses, you need to look at all of them individually. But of course, on a company level, you can learn and share the learnings. What we also will do, of course, with these findings and the reporting, we will create annual reporting, which also, from a generic point of view, we will report back to the Commission. Where did we start this year? Where did we end? What are our learnings? What we also see, for example, and this is a discussion we didn't even mention yesterday, but there have been discussions, or there are ongoing discussions with the European Commission. Should we forbid, for example, the use of big bags in our industry? Because big bags are easily punched by forklifts. And then we said, are you sure? Because it's not only plastic transported in big bags, it's sand and it's all the other things. And is the big bag the problem, or is the way we handle big bags the problem? So for the time being, we managed to get this idea out of their head, but it means that they are really thinking into design issues, into packaging issues, into can we prevent as soon as possible, as early as possible in the chain, leakage. We are very proud and very pleased that PAGEV has taken on board this difficult task, because it's a missionary task. But with the experiences and the meetings we had today, I'm sure you will prevail over many countries in Europe because of the specific setup you managed to do here in the whole value chain. This is quite unique, and I would say not 100% unique maybe, but I would say I don't know many countries in the European Union who have this very detailed setup. So I think it can grow quickly in Turkey, and it's important also for the image. Okay, so it works a bit, if you want, like an ISO certification. Yeah? We are very pleased that also within Turkey you have a certification scheme which has just been accredited, which can help you to go through those things. And we can give you the hands and the tools. The essential requirements are procedures, KPIs if you want, which you can do and which you can combine with, for example, your ISO certification which you have in your companies. And don't try to be perfect in year one, but try to be perfect as soon as possible. And go for the low-hanging fruits. It may mean that you need to invest and close the sewage systems in your companies or on your yards to prevent that for example, granules can go straight after heavy rainfall into the sewage. Maybe you have to put a trap in between to collect those granules. Why it is so important to do third-party auditing, transparency and independent. Independent certification is important. What we need to achieve also in our industry is that whatever we report on, how good or how bad we are, it is transparent and verifiable and it's fact-based. Once you have achieved the certification, it follows a little bit the same path as, for example, an ISO 9000 or an ISO 14000 certification. It's renewed every 3 years. But of course, every year you're required to report. And sometimes, I'll just give you an example. I have one of my companies in Denmark, and in Denmark I would say 25 or 30 companies already have OCS certification applied. Big companies like Lego, they are in this scheme. It's not just signing and getting a certification, it's living it. Yeah. What we also saw, for example, in Denmark, and we also consider all Denmark to be one of the cleaner countries in the world, is that some got the certification and then said, we got certified, so it lost priority. This should be a priority issue all the time. This should be on the agenda of the CEO every time for the years to come. So what we see, and what we said, Plastic Europe pushed its members to get OCS certified. And they even went to the stage that if, as a producing company, a polymer producer company, you don't want to get OCS certificate, you should maybe not be a member of our association anymore. So they went very deep in this one. What do we talk about? Zero pellet loss. We talk also in industry who makes micronized material. Powder, it's even more complex. The recyclers, flake loss. Yeah? If you recycle bottles, you get flakes. Or if you recycle polyolefins, you get flakes. It's not easy. We have, under the umbrella of EuPC, also companies working with polystyrene, expandable polystyrene or polyurethane for example, insulation. It's used often in buildings and building and construction works. The people who are placing these products in the houses have to be made aware that whatever they do has an impact, because if they start breaking the insulation sheets outside, it will flow away because it's very lightweight. It's a voluntary initiative, let's be honest, but in a way it's not as voluntary as that, because we know legislation is following it. The initiative is of course aimed for improved awareness and promoting best practices. We can learn from each other. There will be need for investments next to just the certification. We see, for example, that people are using different tools to broom, to clean. They have changed the way they receive materials. So it is something that needs to be followed very, very closely. In the end, the importance is to prevent the spillage into the environment. 6 commitments. Start at home and look at your factory with different eyes. Look where you can prevent spills, look where they occur. Maybe you have to give training to your staff. Put internal procedures. But procedures alone is not enough. You have to follow up the procedures. So it has to be a regular discussion also with your staff. But also maybe put a bonus or a malus on your staff if they don't follow up. Maybe you have to promote it in that way. Make audits. Comply with national and of course international rules and local rules. And walk the talk and speak the word. Talk to your supply chain. If you see somebody who's bringing raw material to you, for example, ask whether they have heard of this and whether they are not also willing to join. We will, by the way, make these sheets available through PAGEV, so for those afterwards who want to have this, you will get this, of course, so you don't have to write or make photos all the time for the slides, you will get them. So there's going to be an audit list, and this speaks for itself. It's in a similar line as what we see with ISO. So, a few examples. Where do we see main sources? As I already said, goods in the factory, receiving area, for example for sacks, but also for bulk materials. If you just lose 1 kilo when emptying the valve of a silo truck, you have a few thousand granules on the floor. It's loading points for silo trucks, for example, in the logistics centers. This, for example, in ports. So this is also a scheme which could be very important for ports handling things. I know from my past experience, you have in Izmir a very big plant, for example, Petchem. Yeah. Petchem, I think, is also very, we can challenge them.
Sorry, when you are speaking of Petchem, we have Mehmet Ali Professor. He is the advisor for Petchem. Hocam, Mehmet Ali hocam.
Don't worry. But I mean, you also have reducing companies in Turkey. So it could be very important also to be part of this journey.
So he's the one that's old chairman of the company.
Very much welcome, and I hope you are part of this. And I'm sure you will. There's also transport equipment, but of course, just maybe for our friends in the recycling world, you have a wooden pallet with a big bag on top, and on the pallet you have 20 granules. You put this on a truck with 20 pallets, and this truck drives away without you cleaning the pallets. The next corner, they're in the environment. So it is also this kind of practice, which can easily be solved. So prevention is better than removal. And in the storage, many of us have stocks. Many of us also have human beings working with forklifts or with other tools. Not all of them are always as dedicated as they say they are. I've been in charge of several converting companies and recycling companies. I know that sometimes they try to hide that they made a mistake or they made an accident. And what I told my own staff, never forget telling me that you had an accident. I'd rather be angry with you for 2 minutes than finding it out when the damage is even worse. Yeah? Because if you tell me that you made a mistake, I'm not so angry. I may be angry for a minute, but I will help you and we will find out together what caused the image or what caused the incident and can we work it out together. So also that I think it's a lot of a thing. The warehouse, out, think about conveyor belts, think about cleaning, think about if you would do, for example, grinding or micronizing, you may have a dedusting system. The dust in the processing could escape. In the ports or in the production, feeding points near your converting machine, shredders, mixing units, I mean, you name it. When you clean the screens in your grinder, granules will fall on the floor, etc., etc., etc. So there are many spots. But all of them, I think, if we know and we walk through our factories and we work through our businesses, we know every day what happens. And I hope as of today, if not already, you go through the same factory with different eyes and you look critical on what we discussed today. There's always issues about hardware, software, and can we get it approved? So a few things which I think we already mentioned. Handling octobins, big bags, put procedures in place, but also get training to your staff. Check your sewage, check your drain systems. What we saw happening is that people think that they did very well, but they forgot that with heavy rains and with climate change, the rain is changing as well. Things can swap away and swim away. Sometimes if you use, for example, a big bag or a 25 kilo bag, you empty 24.9 kilo. And the last 10 grams is causing 100 pallets on the floor. So be more careful with that. And training, and repeating is the tool. So there are, of course, and who is surprised, plastic industry is very creative. So there are a lot of plastic products which you can use for cleanups, for storage. And this is just the peak of the iceberg. There are many more. What I did in my own companies is I've sent all my staff to a forklift training. They all got certification of forklift driving, including myself, although I never used technically a forklift on my daily work. But I showed by example that if I can do it, you can do it for sure better. So this is also important. Then, if there's an accident, there are hoovers, there are this kind of technologies already existing. So sometimes you may have to invest, maybe in a clean room, but maybe in some sophisticated things. If you have a water cleaning system, you may have a regular check on this one. You have dedusting systems. Maybe you have to look at where is the exhaust of your extruder or your compounder or your filling lines. Then there's the website. What would we do without websites? It's very important. And here I would ask PAGEV to help us, because my knowledge of the Turkish language is close to non-existing. So maybe you could help us to translate this also in Turkish, and in maybe some other languages. But already we did quite a good job, we think, with English, French, Dutch, Spanish, Italian, Polish. What it also shows you, this is going to happen all over Europe. This is going to happen in South America. This is going to happen in Asia. This is going to happen in all international companies working. The same happens, and we did communication material for truck drivers. Also there, Turkish would be a great advantage if you could translate it. I come from the Netherlands. We have truck drivers coming from all over the world. From Romania, Bulgaria, Most of them are great truck drivers, but they're not always good in English or German or whatever. So again, also here, I think as an industry, we need to go further in the translations also to those languages. There is communication tools available in different languages also here, and here you see, for example, the people from Scandinavia have stepped in, so we have it at Danish, Finnish, whatever, Norwegian. Turkish is still missing. Yavuz, please help us there. Huh?
We already have it. We didn't share with you, but
Ah.
we will have the presentation.
Good, already done. That's what I like about PAGEV. That you go ahead without sometimes sharing. Good. Management checklist, also there. Again, it's work in progress, we go. Quick recap. Map your risk. Look into your companies with different eyes, and if you can't do it because you see your company every day, ask somebody else to do it. There's going to be support, I'm sure, also from PAGEV. There's also support possibilities from ours to do a first quick scan. Don't be afraid to ask for best practices. Your colleagues are going through the same phase. There may be some sampling, there may be some reporting, there may be some critical things, there may be some specific things which are not covered by the generic things we thought about. But this is work in progress. If there are things we overlooked, help us to make this further and complete. And in the end, let's stop spillage. I think Yavuz, you said we need a lot of papers, so you see the documents is also certification, documents, structures, rules, and principles. Governance, certification bodies, schemes in development, certification processes, you have them very close already here. Public register, communication, good practices, maybe sometimes bad practices, without pointing the finger, but bad practices to show where you started and where you ended. This is where we are today. There is also the guide on rules and principles, all the requirements, and I'm glad to hear most already available also for you in Turkish. And this is where we stand on the longer view. So earlier this year, we started already in several other countries to roll out this scheme. Some first audits have been done already just before summer, also from people from our own teams, to support the converting industry and the recycling industry. Because I'm not sure whether you are aware, but about 65% of the recycling capacity in Europe is actually owned by converting industry. So we are very big converters, but we're very big recyclers as well. But also with our independent friends from the recycling activity, we are reaching out a hand to help them to get to the next level as good partners. And in the end, we think the second certification scheme should end somewhere in the region of 2027, 2028. In some countries it might be a little bit earlier, in some countries it might be a little bit later. Most important is, let's clean. This is the process. I leave it for you to have a quick look on it. Once you have your OCS certificate achieved, it's going to be listed in the public sector. So everybody can see who has OCS and who has not. And this is not to say that one is better than the other. This is to stimulate the others to also make the next steps. In our company in Denmark, we achieved it 4 years ago, and it was challenging. In our company in Denmark, we are recycling fishing gear, which is quite challenging. It's a lot of fibers. Fibers is like polystyrene. It's very fluffy, and it flows away. And we have done, I think we have invested over 150,000 euros, for example, in our dedusting systems to prevent it from escaping. And we have done under, and in close cooperation, but in the end we had to pay the bill, all the water sewage systems all over this field. And we have about 20,000 square meters. All the sewage systems is linked to a cleaning process before it goes to the sewage. Okay, in a few nutshell, validity of the audit once achieved every 3 years, a little bit what you probably are used with ISO. Renewal audits, external audits, third-party audits are there. If you fail after you receive, there is always a yellow card, and in the end there could be a red card. So once you have it, it's not forever. You have to earn it every single time. It's like ISO. And once you have done the investment, it would be so sorry to lose a certification. So once you have invested in it, make sure you keep it, and you become even better. And you become the good example for your next door neighbor. And trust me, we are talking now just over the plastic industry. This also will go to some other industries who also have leakage issues. But for the time being, it's the plastic industry in the picture. Trade associations like PAGEV, like EuPC, like all of our 46 other members associations have been requested to support the rollout of this system, also throughout the converting industry and to the recycling industries. So don't be afraid to ask. There are no stupid questions. There are no topics we cannot discuss. We know that sometimes you need 3 or 4 or 5 years because sometimes investments are very difficult. But you have to put them on the agenda because you have to do it. Some can do it quickly. Some low-hanging fruits, I would say, you can do very quickly. There are a few others, but once you go into this journey, finish it and make it a cleaner environment, because a cleaner environment also makes it more easy for yourself to work. And of course, if there are, and this is similar like ISO, if an auditor comes and there are a few things which are maybe not as good as they should have been, you don't get a bad note, you probably get a suggestion how to improve. And then, if you feel you need some extra help, reach out to your trade associations. This is a little bit how it works in a public register. So you can go through the holding companies, you can go through the operating companies, you can go to the, so there are many ways of where you will be listed. But as I said, it's a little bit like the EFSA approvals, which we have in the recycling industry, for example, for food contact recyclates. It's publicly available registers. Everybody can look into it who has it. Where do we stand today? I would say click on the button and join today, if you haven't done it. If not, join as soon as possible. Reach out to PAGEV. Let's go for quick audits, look at low-hanging fruits. There are certification bodies who can help you there as well. PAGEV can certainly advise you which one to take. Have a look at the website in all quietness. Look at it again. There's an official website for this Ocean Clean Sweep. And as I said, we already started in some other countries also to reach out and to launch the campaign. A few final words on legal requirements. In France, there has a decree passed for requiring pallet handling sites to be certified against pallet loss. So you see there is also pressure coming from the legal part. Facilities in France have to comply with the French decree as of this year. And I see, Benoit, you are looking, yes, this is a reality. Yeah? And we know also in France there's a lot of plastic industry. And we know laws are not always welcome in that sense, but they are there. And certainly this is not the last country which will come out with national laws on the rollout. So, but fortunately also in France already a lot of converting companies have OCS certification. And the others we try to help them to speed up the processes. Belgium, where we have our offices of EuPC. The VLAREM, which is the Flemish part of Belgium, has updated their legislation and their permissions with the uptake of a study conducted across the Port of Antwerp. The Port of Antwerp for you is one of the larger polymer receiving ports in Europe. A lot of material coming from the southern part of America and from, let's say, Saudi Arabia are being offloaded in the Port of Antwerp, next to the Port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And we have found a lot of floating granules in the waters of the ports of Antwerp. And we're working very close also with the government there to clean up. So the same nets we used here in Turkey, we also used in the Antwerp ports to clean out some of the rivers. And there's another important one which sometimes people tend to overlook. Microplastic will become an obligation across the REACH revision. REACH is the chemical agency looking at all the additives in the plastic and the polymer industry. So REACH is looking at microplastic. Be aware of that. Intentionally added microplastic, as we already said, there is a law proposed coming out. It's still under final debate, but we are very close to the end. The provision will become applicable for all converting industry, including recycling industry, to report as of 2026. 2026 in our journey is tomorrow. For all synthetic polymer microplastic. And I see you saw that it's mentioned in red. There's going to be discussions on responsibility. Because if you don't perform, they might send at a certain moment of time somebody else to clean. And you get the bill to do that. What we did manage to do is transport is not part of, the logistic is not part of the REACH agreement. So it's the converting industry itself. But nevertheless, the REACH agency will continue to follow this process as well. So why is REACH so important? And here we tried to give you an overview. So OCS, of course, is a voluntary scheme, and where voluntary may be put in between brackets. The REACH restriction is a European regulation, it's law. Who is responsible for reporting? In the OCS, it's the Industry Trade Association, like here the PAGEVs. In the REACH, it's the European Chemical Agency. What is reported? The losses across the plant and the boundaries of the plant. What is REACH looking at? Releases to the environment. And now we are back to marine litter, and we are back to everything floating on the beach. What do we report? Estimated quantity of loss. Yeah. What is REACH looking at? Estimated quantity of pellets released. It's a small difference, but a big impact. They also look at generic identity of pellets. If they think they find a lot of polyethylene, for example, instead of polystyrene, they might get special attention to these markets. They also look at the description of the pallet use. They are looking at transport, because transport is considered a big source. If we look at granularity, site level reporting, REACH a legal entity, company level, it's about the same. And the enforcement is the member states. And I think in Turkey it will be probably the Turkish Ministry of Environment or the Turkish Ministry of Health who will take care of this. Yeah. So it's something beyond voluntary. It's something, on the one hand, already we have to do to clean our houses, but it's also something which legislation will come closer. So what we did already in some of our thing is we started to organize voluntary reporting and a survey earlier this year. And we also are in very close dialogue with the European chemical agencies under this discussion. We have 2 people in our staff in Brussels on a regular basis in dialogue with them. The objective, of course, to show that as an industry we want to be part of the solution, and we want to evaluate together with them the extent of the emissions in a transparent way, in an accountable way, and factual way, fact-based. How good are we and what can we do? We also want to show the effectiveness of the implementation of a scheme. It's not just a piece of paper, it is a mindset change. We're also, of course, discussing potential influence of the upcoming regulations on non-intentional microplastic. Because don't underestimate, there is law now for the unintentional, but there's going to be more. And there is a test and implementation and harmonized reporting technology and methodology report to ECHA, which is the REACH chemical agency reporting stream. They talk about guesstimates. My experience with the European Commission guesstimates is not good news for the industry, because 9 out of 10 they have higher numbers than maybe industry realities. And this is where I think also as an industry we have our own responsibility to be as close as possible in our reporting and our data collection on what is going on. The first surveys, as we said, have started recently. We will close it around mid-September. PAGEV will probably run it a bit longer. And then we start, of course, also to look at what's happening in several countries. And we intend to do a first data publication around October, in the last quarter of this year. I know it has been a lot of information. And fortunately, there are more people more qualified than me in our offices who can give you also some support and some help. If there are some questions, I'm happy to take them. And I'm very pleased and very sure that also our friends from PAGEV will certainly be able to help you in the near future on this topic. Thank you very much.